It's a romantic comedy. She's not white. And so the assumption is constantly that she's foreign. And therefore, people treat you differently and speak to you differently, giving me insight into families that I live around but don't talk to or know.
Hi, welcome to Changing Suits. My name's Bal.
And my name's Taj.
Taj always has that pause just before she says, yes, my name's Taj.
Because I have to think about what my name is.
every single time. Okay. I'm always on the tender hooks. What's your name, Taj? Okay. So back to what we're actually supposed to be talking about. So this week we have Dominique Unsworth, who is a producer of a film that's just come out. So we were really excited when Dom said, yes, she will talk to us. So Dominique has just released a film called Little English. Now, for our social media followers, on the day of release, I did put it on story because I was like, this is how exciting is this? Because I did see the trailers. And we want to talk to Dominique about, firstly, why she decided to do this film, but also what the film's about. So, hiya, Dominique. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Just in regards to the film, so I spoke to you quite a while ago when you were first starting the work on this film. And it was a few years ago.
So let me jump in there. How many years ago was it that you started with this film?
So we started, actually this is the film we made is based on a play which was written many years ago, and myself and the director have known each other since 1999. So we've been talking about making a film together since then, and we started making this film together in 2021.
What play was that? I hadn't realised it was based on a play.
So Pravesh's play was called There's Something About Simi. And that was produced through Rifco, his theatre company that he's been running at the same amount of time as my production company. So Rifco Theatre and Resource Productions set up in the same year, and we both still make plays and film.
Lovely. And what made him say yes, finally, to putting this on the big screen?
Well, I think it's kind of one of those complicated things where it's no one person ever says sort of yes. It kind of evolves through a lot of different cogs in the machine. So Pravesh and I talked for years about wanting to make a film together, and obviously adapting one of his plays is an obvious thing. He has a really successful theatre company, Rifco, that tour his plays and other people's plays around the UK. They're the most successful British South Asian theatre company, touring theatre company in the UK. And so we've been talking about that for many years as friends and as colleagues as well. But what actually kickstarted it was the pandemic, which obviously lots of artists, musicians, performers, actors, filmmakers, like everyone else, found themselves out of work during the pandemic. And lots of those people are self-employed, and it's quite a precarious industry. And so that was where the project started, which Resource Productions, my organisation, which is a community interest company, it's not for profit. Our aim was to try and help as many people who were unemployed during the pandemic in the creative industries get work on a production. And so we raised money in 2020, 2021 to try and get money together to run a project that would enable people to get a credit on a film. And our aim was to create a feature film to get everyone work, paid work, and a credit whilst we were legally able to film during the pandemic, because film was one of those priority areas that was allowed to continue. So that's how it all sort of came together. And we actually had about 7 or 8 different scripts from different writer-directors submitted to us. And we had a limited budget. And Pravesh's piece, Little English, was the one that best suited the budget, the time, and the ethos of the company. So we took that forward with Pravesh, and got the rest of the money together.
Talk to us about Little English. What is it about? Let's get straight into the film now.
So the story, without giving too much away, is about, it's a romantic comedy. So I should say that it's primarily entertainment, and Pravesh's work is first and foremost about finding audiences and entertaining them. So it's a romantic comedy with sort of a kind of roller coaster journey of drama. And it's about a young girl called Simi who comes over from the Punjab to have an arranged marriage. And on the night of her wedding, her husband-to-be does a runner, leaving her sort of trapped in her in-laws' house. She doesn't know anyone. She's new to the country. And along the journey, she kind of comes across the younger brother, and it's the kind of journey that those two go on together. You know, will they get together? Will they not get together? Will she marry who she's supposed to marry? Will she follow her own career path and become an independent woman? So that's the backdrop to it. It's not an uncommon story, but I think hopefully the character Simi is a really feisty, strong young woman, and shows kind of young women, particularly those that are coming over, newly arrived to the community in the UK. It gives us a kind of insight into a different way of viewing those characters who have their own thoughts, experiences, education, and just gives you a real insight into a real three-dimensional young woman.
And that pretty much took over the question that I was going to ask you. How realistic is this film, and how often does this happen where a female comes over to get married?
Well, I think I myself am from a mixed background, so I'm not from South Asian community, but whether it's like kind of the Christian community that I'm sort of affiliated with, or whether it's the South Asian community represented in Little English, this way of kind of bringing people over to different countries, be that Canada, America, UK, obviously continues across all cultures, all faiths, all backgrounds. Anyone that says it doesn't is just crazy. It's a daily occurrence. I've got friends and family who have been matched and connected to a partner overseas with very little prior, communication. And, it works. For a lot of people, it works really, really well. But for some people, it's not going to work. The film isn't about, sort of saying one thing is right or one thing is wrong. Hopefully what Little English does is starts a kind of conversation about everyone's ability to choose what's right for them, and to not judge, what the situation is for any one person, but to make sure that they have the opportunity to explore what's right for them. And following Simi's character is very much about someone who has, agreed to a particular way of kind of engaging and coming to this country and marrying someone. And then it doesn't quite work out, as lots of things don't, whether it's an arranged marriage, whether it's a kind of any other kind of partnership, and what happens then, and how do you manage that situation? But the big thing is, it's not a serious film, but it has serious issues in it.
You've said something really interesting where it's a case of, yes, this is about a young lady that's come from Punjab, but this is very much something that happens in all cultures, regardless of religion. And that's one thing on this podcast that we try to reveal. I mean, yes, there's certain things where culturally you're like, oh, okay, that happens. However, it sort of breaks barriers, because I think people that have understood why people are migrating over to the US, UK, Canada, it hits a bit of a chord with them, because it's looking for that better life in regards to economically, financially. People may not be getting jobs. I know from Punjab, that's obviously one of the major issues, and that's why people are moving over. So it's actually understanding why this migration pattern's happening. Now, in regards to yourself, so obviously you're not from the South Asian community. Why, apart from the fact that obviously you were friends with the person that did the play, why did this strike a chord with yourself in regards to getting into the detail of this?
Yeah, I mean, of course, Pravesh and I are friends, but just to reiterate the point, we have open applications at Resource Productions, and we take submissions from hundreds of writer-directors from across the country. And our focus as an organisation, and my focus as an individual, is underrepresentation. And so that's how I got to know Pravesh originally, is that he is coming from an underrepresented community, both outside of London, British South Asian. So there are lots of challenges that he's had to face, and that lots and lots of our writers, directors, technicians, craftspeople have to face in their career paths. So that first and foremost is what drove our selection of the 7 projects we considered for this. And this project particularly for me is what we see a lot of, and that's not to knock any of the amazing artists that we work with, but a lot of underrepresented artists are understandably frustrated, angry. They have very difficult stories to tell. They have barriers that they've had to challenge and overcome. And the joy of this being our first feature film, and the joy of working with Pravesh, is that this is fun and it's entertaining, and it enables people to enjoy themselves whilst also being softly challenged about some of these issues. And, we've made beautiful pieces of work that are issue based, that are films that are very hard hitting, very challenging, that have won awards. And the kind of challenge with this film is that it's probably not going to get the awards or the critical acclaim that it deserves. It does really well with audiences, but because it's not showing, like an honor killing, and it's not showing, the poor, humble Punjabi girl being, sort of mistreated and, sent back to India, it's not got that hard-hitting stuff that we're so used to seeing as the narrative for any underrepresented community in art. And hopefully it turns it a little bit on its head and gives ownership to the community that's representing itself through Pravesh and through all the amazing team that we had that were from the South Asian community in terms of the craftspeople, the technicians. They all were able to put their lived experience into, whether it was costume, makeup, set design, whatever it might be.
Why do you think audiences are still, like you were talking about the awards, that you probably won't get what is deserved? Why do you think audiences, or the people that give out the awards, are still looking for these hard-hitting stories, as in, the vulnerable female and the arranged marriages, the things that you've just said? Why are they still looking for them? Haven't we moved on to think, okay, the South Asian community, there is more to it than just the honor killings and stuff like that?
I think it's really difficult because, particularly in the UK, there is, it's not that long ago that the British were involved in a lot of, some of the things that caused a lot of problems that mean that now there is still a legacy of mistrust and of lack of understanding culturally between, kind of different communities, but particularly South Asian, African, Caribbean communities. So I think what happens is you get this kind of systemic belief that I guess the Brits have to constantly apologise for what they have done, and therefore it's this kind of like, oh, look at these horrific things that are now happening as a result of our legacy. And yes, that's absolutely true. Some horrific things have happened and do happen as a result of colonialism and everything else. However, that shouldn't be at the cost of a community having its own entertainment, having its own stories to tell from a more positive and light-hearted and more entertaining viewpoint. It's either Bollywood or it's award-winning independent British film, which is hard-hitting and, really audiences aren't going to enjoy it, but critics will love it. So it's two ends. In the UK, we have really highly critically acclaimed British independent art house film that doesn't really get people into the cinema, but it gets lots and lots of art house followers, following it, and critical acclaim, and maybe wins awards. And then at the other end, you've got you've got Bollywood, but that's not British and that's not European and that's not the diaspora experience. So there's a big gap between the two.
So, in Bend It Like Beckham, there was the two characters. And I'm going to forget their names. I've got the worst memory.
Keira Knightley and Narinder.
Yeah.
I've got, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, there's this whole debate about how Kiran has gone off and she's made this wonderful career, whereas Narinder I don't even remember.
I don't know. I
don't even remember her name, for God's sake.
This is the problem.
It's really bad.
Yeah.
And she is doing well for herself, but not at the level of her counterpart. Basically, why is that? And it's probably still going to happen. Why is that?
That's it's been really interesting that loads of people have compared this film with Bend It Like Beckham, East is East, and it's been
not many films out there.
I just sorry, Parminder Nagra, and I did know that name. I've just Googled it. I'm like, how could I forget? But it brings up a very good point, actually. The fact that I've even got the name wrong, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, and it is crazy. But if that was 20 odd years ago, and it's actually the anniversary now, and Gurinder Chadha has been really supportive of this film and the need for this kind of film, and we're building on a legacy of films like that. But back then it was even harder. But it's sad that it's still hard, that we found out through our publicist that actually there doesn't seem to have been another British film that features two South Asian British actors in the lead role, let alone in a romantic lead role. Yeah, so with films like Bend It Like Beckham, the hope was that the British South Asian actors would have as many opportunities as everyone else in the cast. And, you could argue they had the same platform, they had the same support, they had the same coverage. But ultimately, at that time, and even now, how many characters are written for an actor that looks like that?
Is it because Asians still see themselves as not beautiful, the character, and they see that someone that's white is seen beautiful? Because we almost been, what could you say? Because we see in magazines not many Asian people. Because we see on the cinema not many Asian people, so we identify as the white person as beautiful and an Asian dark person as not beautiful. Could it be
I think
something
there's
to do with
definitely
that?
this kind of white savior kind of challenge and issue, which is, both in storylines but in casting. I don't know if I think it's as much a problem outside of the community as it is inside the community.
100%
And
agree with that. I think you make a
there's
really good point there.
there's a real commercial issue as well, where for many years that the commercial market said that, oh, a film will not sell internationally if there is a black or Asian or East Asian co-lead, and you would have to fight to kind of say, well, do you know what, this will travel internationally. It's a commercial or perceived commercial issue that has led lots of people who are the gatekeepers for deciding if a film gets financed, if a TV show gets financed. Their perception is that audiences are not ready for a non-white lead or romantic lead or whatever it might be. But times have moved on, and audiences are ready. White audiences, South Asian audiences, diaspora audiences, they are more than ready. The problem is that the industry takes a long time to catch up with what people are doing, and what people are watching, and even more now with streaming services and everything like that. The mainstream cinema really struggles to kind of adapt and to respond to what people's changing needs are and the changing audience demographics. And the British, South Asian, and indeed the diaspora of South Asian communities is a global majority. People for years have been saying ethnic minority, and actually we're talking about a global majority audience when we're talking about the diaspora from South Asia. It's not a small market.
Yeah, we're getting black actors, for example, who are starting to lead more and more. For example, Wakanda, I'm going to say that wrong, the film, where there's pretty much the whole cast, I think, is black. So it's moving, but I don't think the South Asians are moving at that rate. It's still.
But you say that because if you look at the Bollywood industry, I mean, it's a huge industry. You go to any country,
Massive, yeah.
Bollywood is very much. But then it goes back to what you said earlier, Dom. It has to be very hard hitting for it to be in the headlines, or it has to be something like the Bollywood, which, unbelievably, we don't just all sing and dance like that. Every so often, I might break out into singing, but the rest of us, most people don't do that. So perhaps we're sort of in the middle of that sort of era because Bollywood has smashed it. I mean, there's no way, it's a $3 billion industry, I think I read somewhere. So, I mean, I think is that bigger than Hollywood? I don't know if you know the answer to that, but
It's definitely comparable with it. So interestingly, Bollywood and Nollywood, the Nigerian African equivalent, they're really, really sustainable, multi-million pound industries, but they're just not regarded with as much respect. But actually, increasingly, you look at the Malayalam cinema, Telugu, films. There's so many different markets that aren't just Bollywood that actually are now doing really well in British cinemas. For example, I think in the top 50, there's at least three South Asian films, not British South Asian, but South Asian, and they're doing relatively better than most of our own. Well, than all of our British content. So we need to learn lessons from some of those kind of parts of the lesser known South Asian.
Who are the gatekeepers and.
Well, I think the main funder that we have in the UK is the British Film Institute, and we're really lucky in that the British Film Institute have supported resource productions for many years in terms of talent development and training, but we've never actually received funding to make a film. And we got rejected when we were trying to make this film because it's just so competitive and there's so many people out there with so many stories to tell. But the BFI did actually give us a little bit of funding to get this film out to cinemas because they recognised what we were saying about the audience needs and how are you going to get people into the cinema if you're not giving them stories that they want to see.
because this is very much in depth because obviously from the outsiders, but we're sitting in the cinema, you don't realize how much work, and there is a lot of work that you wouldn't realize that goes on behind the scene with ethnic minority films, especially South Asian film, well, especially the whole of the ethnic minority films. It is even tougher than it otherwise would be. Let's bring it back to Little English though. You very much know, probably more than I do, to be fair, now after doing this film. What surprised you about the topics that you covered in here?
I mean, to be honest, nothing really surprised me. But what surprised me is that people went, "Oh, I've not seen that tackled in a South Asian context before." So, there are lots of issues in all of Pravesh's plays and workings. And I always say when I go to see his plays at the theatre, they're all comedies and entertainment, but I come out crying my heart out because it just the way in which you get sucked into relationships and relatable characters, and then you go on that journey with them, so then when they encounter an issue, you really feel it and you can relate to it. So some of the issues in Little English are really quite very emotional. We had a screening in Bedford the other day, and we were just reading some of the feedback, and issues like Alzheimer's dementia are dealt with. And that's one of the interesting things that came up for us was that we wanted a film in a hospice, or somewhere that looked like a care home kind of environment. We were really lucky that in Berkshire we have Thames Hospice, which is an amazing hospice. And actually, one of their things is that they had encountered that there was potentially cultural barriers to local residents from South Asian communities feeling that they could use the facilities at the hospice. And so the hospice worked with us and enabled us to film there because they saw the value of seeing South Asian representation aligned with their hospice to make sure it's clear that it is for everyone and that all communities are welcome to use care services and care facilities. And that was a potential challenge that they'd found internally. Maybe they weren't able to reach that community as well as others. But similarly, we found within the community that people were saying, well, there is still some stigma associated with not being able to look after your family at home. And that's the same in all communities, but actually to be able to represent the importance of care and the services that are on offer here in Berkshire and across the country is really important. So that whole kind of piece around long-term care, looking after elderly family relatives, houses where you've got multi-generations in them and how you look after the elders is really, it's a really important issue that doesn't get talked about maybe enough. And that's not something we bang on about in the film, but it's there consistent throughout. There's a character, Bauji, the granddad, we are watching and who endears himself to you. And through that character, we can explore those issues that are really quite tricky without having to bang on about them, really.
The other thing that's interesting in regards to the film is that aside from the fact that we are South Asian and we understand the issues that are happening because we very much have had that in our own family, to tell you the truth. So things like dementia. One thing we really like highlighting is the fact that there is a positive to this. Yes, there are negative parts of the culture. However, to have that family group, and yes, it is hard on people, but I know with our grandparents, we lived with them. We know how hard dementia was. I mean, the number of times I had to listen to the same joke from my granddad and he'd laugh and we'd have to laugh as well. But the fact that you've done it in such a holistic way, because there is always that issue going on, but there's so many other issues that are going on at the same time. And it's not always serious. You have to make it a bit lighthearted because it's life, right? So that's the lovely thing. And I have to say, I was saying to Dom before we started recording, I live in Slough, just like Dom does, and she's a big, passionate, go-getter for Slough. I know that, with this film, where you've set it in Slough, you understand the South Asian issues because obviously Slough has a lot of South Asian people. What made you so passionate about having this film set in Slough itself?
I think, a lot of Pravesh's work is set here because he's born and bred here as well. I'm a relative newcomer. I came 20 odd years ago, which I've lived most of my life now in.
That's not that new, Dom.
So I feel like I've been here a long time. And, I left London. I grew up in southeast London, and I left London because I felt the loss of that kind of community, where people look out for each other and where people are maybe potentially over interested in each other. The kind of village gossip kind of can get a bit too much.
The aunties, we know about the aunties.
And, I remember growing up in southeast London, we still had some of that, but as I got older, that was lost, and coming to Slough, I accidentally ended up here through going to uni down the road at Royal Holloway, and this was the end of the bus route and where you could buy the kind of food that you wanted to eat from home. You couldn't get that in Surrey anywhere. So I ended up here and realised that it just felt like a really good community, like people actually cared about each other from different backgrounds. There was a kind of a lot of people have come to this town to start their careers, to start their lives, to start their families. And it's a very supportive cross-cultural town. And it didn't have the ghettoization that you get in bigger cities like London, where you've got this area for those people, those shops for those people. There is some of that, but actually no one would ever judge you for going into one place or another place. So that's what for me made, and I'm, like I said, I'm from mixed heritage. So it's always difficult when you do come from different cultural kind of families and backgrounds to then fit in. And Slough was somewhere where I felt immediately that anyone can fit in. And, a lot of what Pravesh is saying in Little English about, the juxtaposition of different cultures and experiences and being new to a community, or, being too British to be regarded as being Indian, or being too Indian to be regarded as being British. Like, that's all stuff that I can relate to in terms of my own heritage, and just in terms of like, where do we all fit in, and which group do we see ourselves represented in. And it's very difficult in modern Britain to find where your culture is from and where you should be kind of connecting to and who you should be connecting to. So Slough is just, a melting pot of everything where everyone has a place, basically.
So for all those haters of Slough, listen to this podcast, because Dom will set you straight there.
Definitely.
Say, Dom, I feel like moving to Slough. You sold it really well.
That's why we got Dom on here. I was like, Tad, just move over. It makes our life a bit easier. So part of my other question was the fact that the young lady in Little English moves over from India, the Punjab. There is also that aspect from people that are British South Asians from here that also look down on people that have moved over. Is that something that Little English, and I know the answer is going to be yes, because I'm waiting to see it. I mean, it was sold out in Slough. I was like, how can this happen? What came across in your film, and did that surprise you in itself as well?
I think, having known lots of amazing women that I have met who have come over in, the last 20 years when I've been in Slough from all over India and Pakistan, and they come to Slough and anywhere in the UK, and like their education levels, their life experience, their modern South Asian women. And very much when you come to somewhere like Slough, much as I love it and, I really enjoy being here, lots of people in this community came here in the 50s and 60s, and they're still in that kind of, this is what India and Pakistan are like. And you're like, no, it's moved on somewhat dramatically if you go to those countries. And a lot of us that are from, other heritage, if we were to go back to those places, we would be very much out of touch and are. And what I love about Simi's character is she represents all those women that I've met, and men that I've met, who are the modern, Punjabi, Indian, Pakistani, and, African women, men who come over here to start a life, and they have better schooling than us. They have, a better understanding of the world than us. Not everybody, but it depends, obviously on someone's upbringing. But by and large, it's so shocking that, as one of the themes of the kind of character is that her English isn't great. But, the whole point through the whole film is her English isn't great, but that's just one tip of one person's lived experience, their knowledge, their intelligence, it's very frustrating when, it gets to the point that people are kind of utilizing the way you speak as some kind of indicator on your capacity, your capability, and your intelligence. And that sadly across all cultures persists, my mother was born in Mauritius, and she has a slight French accent that remains, and she's not white, and so the assumption is constantly that she's foreign, and therefore people treat you differently and speak to you differently just because you have an accent. And I think that is something that is really difficult to manage.
Touching on the accent thing, quite a lot of people in the South Asian community, if they have got that Indian accent, they do get mistreated. For example, just phoning up a doctor's surgery, the receptionist will be like, oh, they don't understand, so I'm just not going to make life difficult for them. And then that makes a person feel unconfident. And this happens a lot. And again, you're right. When someone's got an accent, people do take the mick out of it,
And this is generally, and this is the point I was trying to make, even people, British South Asians from here, then also look down on people that have come over, and that is, and I think this whole conversation has sort of opened my eyes as to the fact of, why is that happening? Have we then taken on this whole, what's the word? I'm going to say it. So the superiority, that perhaps, although we're minorities in this country and therefore go through that cultural barrier, which is why we're suffering in so many areas, we're then treating other people like that. So at what point does this?
Yeah, it's like the refugees when they're coming over. We're like, oh, we don't want them in our country. Well, we came from another country. Our parents came from another country. We don't want
turning
them
all political. Who knew this light-hearted film?
We don't want them taking our, we don't want them taking our jobs. Look in the mirror. What's going on?
But I think this is the nice. But I think this is the nice thing about what you've said. I think a lot of communities have gone through the same thing, and you sort of forget the issues that our parents had. We are second generation. What our parents went through to get here and how hard it was. So this film really highlights, and in a really fantastic way, such a humorous film with very serious underlying issues, and something we need to start reflecting ourselves on. How are we coming across as well?
So just to actually add, we were just having a discussion before we started recording that I was saying we haven't got any cinemas in Swindon that are showing this film. Why is that? Why are there certain areas that the film isn't being shown in?
Yeah, so to get a film out to the cinema is completely crazy and almost impossible. So what we ended up doing is we got a small grant from the British Film Institute to help us do a tour. And with that funding, we were able to hire a film consultant, Anit, and she's been amazing and just, she knows how cinemas work in the UK. And so she has been booking and contacting lots of cinemas. And chains like Cineworld, who understand the value of their British South Asian audiences, have been like, right, okay, we know where there are large South Asian communities. We know where Bollywood films, for example, do well. And so they have then easily been able to go, okay, do you know what? We're going to put this in Feltham. We're going to put this in South Ruislip. We're going to put this in where we know people come for Bollywood film, which is good in some respects because that they have an understanding that that's an important and valuable customer to them. But then they've pigeonholed them with the whole Bollywood thing. So it's now like trying to educate them about this isn't a Bollywood film. It's very, very different. But at least they have that an understanding of the importance of the audience. So there's a chains like that understand it. And then similarly, View has picked it up for like Birmingham Star City. They get that there should be an audience there for British South Asian content. But other localities and cinemas may not be aware of those audiences because those audiences aren't coming to them. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Cinemas, whether they're independent art house cinemas or whether they're big major chains, will go, well, no South Asians that we know of come to our cinema, therefore there are no South Asians and there is no audience, when actually it's that's not the reality.
But can I stop you there? Because this film is in English. So it's not just for a South Asian population, is it? For a South Asian community. It's actually very much widespread because it is in English, whereas a lot of Bollywood films are just going to be in Hindi mainly.
Yeah. And I think that's why we haven't been able to pick up marketing or distribution. So we haven't got sales, we haven't got a distributor. No one's picked it up to sell the film because, we've gone out there and put on our poster 2 young, unknown actors who are British, South Asian. And that is something that still cinema chains, distributors do not know how to sell because for those reasons. So we put that poster up and immediately a large part of the population will think, oh, there's 2 brown people. This is a film for brown people. Whether we like it or not, that's how people work. Those people that are just interested in stories will want to go and see it. But I think the really powerful thing for me, which I think cinemas, chains up and down the country need to learn from, is my happiest screening to date, which was a really packed out screening in Bolton in Lancashire. We had a screening within a really large South Asian community, predominantly Pakistani Muslim community. However, there's a Gurdwara just down the road, and there was a Hindu temple just down the road, and a few people from each community came. But the largest population was white, working class, older people. And the feedback that we got from that audience was just absolutely amazing. That predominantly white audience loved this film. And the biggest consistent bit of feedback was, thank you for giving me insight into families that I live around but don't talk to or know. And the fear factor of like accidentally insulting someone or not fully understanding how to speak to them and being nervous of someone that looks different to you, by watching that film, we had a little gathering afterwards, and people were talking to people for the first time that they'd be too afraid to speak to, because it's just not in their lived experience to know someone from a different background. And I'd love to see more, non-South Asians seeing films like this. And it's really difficult to market to that audience when they look at a poster and it's not them on it.
On that point, the 3 points that have come out, I'm going to forget the last 2 because that's what happens. I think that's a really interesting point, because even with the work that we're doing, the service providers, it's now become a bit of a library of, okay, so that's how the South Asian community are looking at that issue. That's fantastic, because it's not actually that far away from how we're going through. And even if it is, now I understand it. Now we can change the tact and the language. So I think that sort of breaking of barriers, that's fantastic to hear that you're doing it. Is that one of the reasons that you've actually called this film Little English, to sort of open it up to the audiences like that?
Well, I think Pravesh really likes to play on words, and the original play was There's Something About Simi, which is a very light-hearted, kind of parody. But I think the importance of having English in the title was really important to him. And when we came to design the poster, I think it was him that came up with the idea of, I don't know if you've seen the final poster, but it has the St. George's Cross in the background.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, either you get it straight away and you go, oh, we've had a few people going, oh, I thought it was about like, white supremacy or nationalism or something. I was like, I don't know, it's not that in your face. So I think it's pretty subtle. But
now I'm looking at now that makes sense. I've just Googled it and I'm like, oh yes, I see it now. Didn't know it.
So that was Pravesh's kind of, hark back to, what makes us English, what is it about us that makes us all English? And is it always what you think it is? And language is a part of that. Culture is a part of that. Upbringing is part of that. And actually Harry's character, so that the British-born South Asian character is a real juxtaposition to Simi, and it's about how he has to, understand his own heritage and his own identity. And I see so many of these young men and women who are born here and are completely detached and almost embarrassed by their cultural heritage.
This is a conversation we had yesterday with another podcast we were recording. The fact that people are slightly embarrassed about their heritage. What has shocked you in this film, and obviously you've brought it up in this film as well, about just the fact that people are embarrassed? Why is that happening from your point of view? I'm going to say from the outside, because you're not South Asian, but looking in, what's causing that?
I think hopefully it's changing with every year that passes, as people find their own, British, South Asian, British Caribbean, British Mauritian, whatever background. But definitely from the point of view of Pravesh, who wrote this, there was a time when those of us that are in our, 40s or whatever, when we were younger, where all you wanted to do at school was fit in. And it comes very much from that. There's a really amazing line where Harry talks about, having to learn how to write his name in Punjabi and absolutely hating it because like it was different. And that when you're a teenager, when you're a kid, the last thing you want to be is different. And if you don't have enough people around you who are similar to you, whatever that might be, then it's really difficult. And it's hard to get through those really important young years when you don't have someone who you think you can identify with or be with. And you just want to fit in. And I think for me, that's one of the themes of the film is like, how do you fit in whilst actually creating your own path and making your own identity and being proud of who you are and where you come from, and sculpting that new thing, which really is relatively new in the last couple of generations, of what it means to be British. And, your heritage is from somewhere you may never have even been. It's a weird conflict internally for anyone, and it's really difficult to find your place in society when you don't see enough role models and you don't feel that you're in the majority in any situation.
The other question I wanted to ask you was the fact that with your white audiences, they automatically look at the poster and say, oh, okay, it's got Asian people, it must be for Asians. And, you know, in that one instance where they've actually realized, actually, this is a film we can relate to, we've understood another culture. For the fact that most films are going to be the same as that, if you see brown people on the cover or black people on the cover, you think it's for that community. So there's a few issues that I've been thinking about over the last few weeks that have been happening generally in other parts of the world. Now, on the media, if we had the story about the same issues that are happening, but with white people on there, and then maybe a title at the end saying, oh, by the way, this is the same issues that are happening in XYZ, whichever country it's in. Do you think that would actually encourage people then to start breaking down those barriers, start to understand, well, actually, although, you know, this is about different community, we now understand this is actually, I know this can sound so corny, but a human problem, not just a problem for just brown people or black people.
I think there's definitely something in that, but I think it's really tricky because it's kind of, you know, we've had almost 100 years of British cinema showing us those characters, saying those things and dealing with those issues. And there is nothing like seeing someone different go through those issues, you know, from whatever background you're from. You know, our film came out on the same day as a film called Rye Lane, which has two young black British actors in the lead. And you know, their film is doing really, really well and is attracting lots of different audiences. But I honestly think it's not any longer the issue about representation, the filmmakers, all of that. I think the issue is around, you know, will some of these global brands like the Disneys, the Netflixes, the Amazons, the Warner Brothers, will they actually put marketing and promotion budget behind faces that look different and faces that are unknown? Because you've got two challenges. You know, if these two actors were, you know, the number one A-listers that everyone recognized around the world, it wouldn't really matter what color they were. People would go and see that film. But we're at a point where we don't have, you know, a critical mass of really well-known black, South Asian, East Asian actors. There's a handful that the powers that be deem able to command an audience. And until we build up lots more actors and really well-known brands, then it's going to always be hard to market this kind of film. So we hope we've helped our two on their way and that they'll become two of the future, you know, kind of well-known faces, the Keira Knightleys or whatever of the future. But yeah, it's really difficult right now where there's just not enough money put behind people from underrepresented backgrounds, and as a consequence they never get the opportunities and they never get to be A-listers, and then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
This is deeper than I thought it was going to be.
I was going to say I was ready to have a laugh and find out what Simi was up to, but this has really opened my eyes up. And you know, I think we've sat down a few times and you've sort of, your Slough being obviously the first thing we talk about because you love Slough so much, but also the issues that you do touch on a personal level are very much insightful, even for people of the South Asian community, because you don't realize what you don't know, right? Until someone says it or you see it on the cinema. And this is why it's so important that we do back films like Little English, because not only will it raise awareness for us, but it will help the industry as a whole. And that's from all communities. Whether you're South Asian, whether you're white, whether you're black, we need to be supporting each other because essentially we're all going through very similar issues, regardless of the colour that we are. So thank you so much, Dom. Just give us a quick update as to where the film's going to be showing.
So Little English is still hanging on a couple of Cineworlds and Views. We don't know how much longer it will be in the likes of Feltham. It will also be in Star City, in Birmingham. So the biggest places to go and see it at the moment are the question and answer tours that we're doing around the country. So we're going to be in Warwick at the Arts Centre. We're in Leicester at the Phoenix. We're going to be at the Riverside Studios this Friday the 31st at Hammersmith. And then next week, we're going to start a run at Maidenhead in Norden Farm Arts Centre near Slough. We don't have a cinema in Slough, sadly. So we're at Norden Farm in April for a few dates as well. And the cast and crew will be at a lot of the screenings. So if you go to littleenglishfilm.com, littleenglishfilm.com is where all of the tour dates are being added every day. And as cinemas come online, more dates will be added. So we're screening all the way into May, all across the country. And we're going to try and get out to the West Country if we can. And we desperately want to get to Glasgow. So if anyone's got a cinema in Glasgow as well, one of our amazing actors, Sanjeev Kohli, is based up in Scotland, and we'd love to do a screening up there. So fingers crossed it will continue.
Lovely. Please do support Little English. Go and see it. Tell everybody about it and share it on your social media. Thank you so much, Dom, for coming on today and discussing such important issues that are going on in the community today. I think not only has it opened our eyes, but hopefully it's opened a lot of other people's eyes as well.
Thank you.
That's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.